time to talk about bias that can occur in a study. And while we maybe cannot completely remove bias, we have to examine each bias and do our best to remove it as much as possible. And that's really the science of statistics. Realizing that humans are naturally, in our upbringing, are fairly biased in what we like and what we don't like. So by becoming aware of this, we can do studies that are going to be more accurate. So here's our list. There's a voluntary response bias. This is what happens when people can volunteer. Generally, you're just going to get people who are interested in that topic who have something to say about it. There's also a self-interest study. So oftentimes a pharmaceutical company that has a new drug, they maybe shouldn't be the ones involved in the testing because they might have a lot at stake in making sure that it works, that the study comes out well. Same type of thing is if you want to do a study on your school or whatever you're doing, there is that self-interest. We want the study to make us look good. So oftentimes we have to look for bias within those types of studies. There is response bias, and this can occur in many different forms, but it's whenever someone in a survey, in an observational study, which we'll talk about later, doesn't give an accurate answer. Maybe not on purpose, but their answer is not accurate. Some of the reasons for this, it could be a perceived lack of anonymity. This happens when you've got maybe personal confidential information that's being asked of in a public setting, and or it might even be an individual setting, but their fear is by answering it, that data becomes public. Okay. There's also a non-response bias. Sometimes people go through a survey and some questions they just don't answer. So by not answering, a large group not answering it, that introduces some bias. Maybe that question won't be able to be used in the study. And finally, there are loaded questions. These are questions that are asked in a way that lead you to want to respond in one way or another. So with that in mind, let's take a look at a few of these questions. Question 11 here, it's asking, identify the most relevant source of bias. A survey asks the following: should the mall prohibit loud and annoying rock music in clothing stores catering to teenagers? Those words, loud and annoying, are leading you. Well, yes, loud and annoying classical music. Any kind of annoying music shouldn't be allowed. So that word is definitely giving us a leading or a loaded or leading question. And here's question 13, asking the same thing. A survey asked people to report their actual income and the income they reported on their IRS tax form. Well, what do you think? I give this information. I said I made this much, but I actually made that much. Am I going to be honest? Well, if I lied on my taxes, why would I tell the truth on a survey, especially when I'm worried that my information might make it back to the IRS? This is a perceived lack of anonymity. Okay, and for 15, let's take a look at that. A survey asked the following: should the death penalty be permitted? And that was a good question. We stopped there. If innocent people might die. That if innocent people might die sort of tugs at you, doesn't it? It leads you to an answer that you might not have given if they stopped the question with just, should the death penalty be permitted? So this is also going to be a loaded question. One other things to look at on surveys, which this text doesn't really address, but there's even an ordering of the questions. So if you've got multiple questions, 5, 10 questions, sometimes the order that you ask those questions can also lead to different results or responses from people. So all of these things need to be examined, run through the human subjects a review board, and to make sure that every survey is doing its best to overcome the effects of bias.